Democrats in this controversy over freshman Congresswoman Ilhan Omar.
Omar says the hope and change offered by Barack Obama was a mirage. We don't want anybody to get away with murder because they're polished.
The Democrats have become an anti-Israel party. They've become an anti-Jewish party.
The incident that happened was, I don't think our colleague is anti-Semitic.
When somebody like Representative Omar says something that's utterly indefensible, Nancy Pelosi has to go out and risk looking like a fool.
Actor Jussie Smollett indicted on 16.
His finest there, brave men and women in uniform, also showing off some other talents. Pete did a little bit of that himself. He's still got it.
Yeah, we'll
Showing
see.
off other
saw
talent.
the fitness test a little bit.
A little bit. And there's no special day. I don't think it's like Air Force Day. We just bring them in. If it's Fox and Friends weekend, we find every excuse to honor our military.
There's always a
We
reason.
should.
We're glad they're here.
We're learning a lot about Pete this morning. He has a little more affection for Elizabeth Warren.
I agree with her on something. Yeah, we should
breaking
talk
up
about that
Facebook
later.
and others.
There
Yeah,
might be
we'll get
a
into that a
duality
little bit
ticket
more.
there. Exactly.
No ticket to be had there.
Meanwhile, you've heard the media spending a whole bunch of days recently, in particular, saying the president has had a really bad stretch, going back to the summit in Vietnam, the testimony from Michael Cohen. Now, all of a sudden, he appears to be on verge of a major victory, a major national security success. We'll see whether folks follow up and actually give him credit.
Reporting this morning, and we've been hearing this for a while. Weeks ago, I heard one of our own reporters talk about how they have about a football field size piece of terrain left. I believe it's the size of Central Park. Well, ISIS is now backed into a corner in Syria, and they've lost all their territory. They're on the banks of a river at the last gasp of a few fighters holding on to their so-called caliphate. This is what remember this, it was no small feat to crush ISIS. They were growing. They came out of the retreat in Iraq.
Don't forget President Obama called them the JV team.
Obama called them the JV team. President Trump said, I'm going to defeat them. This is what President Trump said years ago, about defeating ISIS. Listen.
In the Middle East, our brave warriors have liberated virtually 100% of ISIS in Iraq and Syria. We have liberated virtually all of the territory from the grip of these bloodthirsty monsters. We will do what it takes to defeat every ounce and every last person within the ISIS madness and defend our people from radical Islamic terrorism.
All right, I'm pretty good at eating humble pie. So that clip is from a month ago. But
Nancy Pelosi has to go out and risk looking like a fool.
Actor Jussie Smollett indicted on 16 felony counts following his allegations that he was the victim of a hate crime in Chicago.
The House passed a sweeping election reform bill.
Thanks to President Trump's strong leadership, the ISIS caliphate, once the size of the UK, is now down to their last scrap of territory as U.S.-backed fighters prepare to move in. This is so significant, and it's not being covered the way that it should, because everything that the president does, if it's a success, it's ignored from the left. And this is the kind of thing that it was such a huge campaign promise, and it has tremendous significance and impact on all of us.
To your point, it's only mentioned in the media when the president hinted at the idea on Twitter some weeks ago that he might pull all U.S. forces from Syria. Then you had the media jumping in and saying, he's going to lose it against ISIS. Then he considered it, brought his national security team in, said he's going to leave a small amount of U.S. troops in. And now here we are with ISIS with their backs against the wall. We'll see if the same people who said the president's about to blow the victory will actually give him credit.
Great point. They're in tents and pickup trucks on the banks of a river about to be totally crushed. They're trying to let civilians out, but civilians, of course, are being used as shields by ISIS because that's what they do. But they'll be gone from this earth quickly, and they're still paying attention to it, Ed. They realize residual folks will still try to reestablish it.
Well, they are now feeling the full weight of the U.S. military, and that is a very good thing. Meanwhile, Democratic primary voters looking to 2020, they may be feeling the burn again. We saw this in 2016, where Bernie Sanders, almost out of nowhere, I was covering that campaign, every smart person in the Democratic Party pretty much thought Hillary Clinton was going to waltz in. That's why Joe Biden and others stayed on the sidelines then. And when I was at Bernie Sanders rallies, and Clinton rallies, I was stunned time and time again by the huge crowds Bernie was getting. And, you know, the Clinton people dismissed it as sort of this fantasy and just young people coming out, they weren't going to vote. And yet he kept gaining momentum, and we're seeing it again. He's starting slowly to get big, big crowds.
Well, it's like you were just saying, too, just before that, not to dismiss him. That would be the most dangerous thing possible, is to dismiss him and not take as a repeat the size of these crowds and the size and the amount of that energy that we're seeing of people feeling the burn.
He was in Iowa City, Iowa yesterday. Here's Bernie Sanders.
This is a campaign which is not only going to win the Democratic nomination, is not only going to defeat Donald Trump, the most dangerous president in modern American history, but this campaign is about more than that. We will no longer tolerate the greed of Wall Street and the greed of the billionaire class. We'll pass a Medicare for all single-payer healthcare system. Donald Trump, he embarrasses us every single day.
Look, he's a socialist Democrat, starting as a socialist. Now he's become like a socialist Democrat in order to work within the Democratic Party a little bit. But he drew these massive crowds, as I mentioned, in 2016. And I spoke to a smart Democrat yesterday who told me, look, they're watching on social media. He had an event in Chicago the other day. Massive crowd.
What's a smart Democrat?
I knew you might jump on that.
Smart Democrat.
All right,
Go ahead, Emma.
Sorry.
Please.
The Washington Post had a headline, as Bernie Sanders launches his second presidential campaign, big crowds, but some doubt in early states.
The doubt from smart Democrats who got it so right last cycle. Now, Grant Woodward, he's an Iowa-based Democratic lawyer, had this to say. He said, I think the big issue going forward is how much of the support he had in Iowa 4 years ago was people that truly bought into his movement, and how much of it was people who fundamentally didn't want to support Hillary Clinton. I mean, the smart money was on Hillary then, the smart money's on somebody else now, but you can't underestimate the investment people had in Bernie
Are they
Sanders.
sleeping on him again? Are they saying, oh, a socialist will never... He's now within the mainstream of the Democratic Party. His ideas seem pie in the sky, Medicare for all, and now the Green New Deal. That's all Bernie. That's the Bernie script. And so maybe the Democratic Party is much more left than the mainstream media wants to admit, and he might do a lot better in these primaries than these quote-unquote smart people think.
Well, and it doesn't seem like it's losing any energy to simply give everyone the benefit of the doubt until you're proven otherwise, rather than the opposite, where there would be a surprise you can't recover from. Also remember that his response to Ilhan Omar's comments were not the rallying to the opposite side, the staunchly denouncing the comments that most people were hoping to see. So that, too, kind of belies his position, and he might be much more far left than people think.
Well, Bernie Sanders defended Ilhan Omar. It pays to be the original gangster. Right. I mean, to be the original gangster socialist. He was Bernie before Bernie was cool. Now, I was in Vermont yesterday at a diner for Fox and Friends, talking to the folks on the ground, and I asked citizens of Vermont who have been with Bernie Sanders for decades what they thought of Bernie. Listen. What do you think of Bernie Sanders?
I am not a fan. I moved to Vermont 6.5 years ago. My liberalism is waning the longer I live here, and I think Bernie's part of that problem.
Bernie's not really been favorable to the state of Vermont. His focus is anti-gun. He's focused on socialism, so not a big Bernie fan.
The socialism isn't going to work. It's not affordable.
You can't keep giving and giving, getting from people and not getting from somewhere else and expect that it's going to last.
Yeah.
To be fair, we weren't talking to a lot of fans of Bernie, but they all acknowledge that he's caught fire nationally, that the message of socialism is the mainstream of the Democrat Party. They just point to Vermont and say, our lives here haven't gotten better. We're paying people $10,000 to come to Vermont as they leave to go to Texas in a business-friendly environment.
So what do you think? Is the mainstream media sleeping on Bernie Sanders? Again, friends at foxnews.com. And is the Democratic Party more socialist than folks in the media, folks in the party want to admit?
All right, let us know. Turning now to your headlines, Jussie Smollett maintains his innocence still after a grand jury indicts him on 16 new felony counts for disorderly conduct. The Empire actor is accused of staging a hate crime against himself. If convicted, he could face 3 years behind bars for each count. The indictment comes after Chicago police launched an internal investigation, and officials want to know how the press got certain information on the case. A search now underway for a missing Marine. First Lieutenant Matthew Kraft never returned to base, at Camp Pendleton after going on a ski trip in California. He was last seen 2 weeks ago. Search and rescue crews are looking in the area where he went skiing. Authorities releasing these photos of the Marine's rental car he drove on the trip. The Air Force has no plans to look into Senator Martha McCalley's sexual assault claims. The Arizona Republican making the shocking revelation earlier this week that she was assaulted by a superior officer.
I stayed silent for many years, but later in my career, as the military grappled with scandals and their wholly inadequate responses, I felt the need to let some people know I too was a survivor.
Now, the Air Force is saying they cannot open an investigation until she agrees to participate, but they remain ready if she changes her mind. Critics are pushing back against springing forward to daylight savings time this weekend, calling it obsolete and unhealthy. Recent studies say the change in sleep patterns twice a year increases cases of depression and heart attacks. Bills introduced in Congress would make daylight saving time year-round nationwide. Clocks will spring forward 1 hour at 2 a.m. Sunday morning. Glad I had that reminder, I will say.
Now, former esteemed host of this program, Clayton Morris, is an avowed enemy of daylight savings. Just a shout out to him. Right? Am I right, Dave? It's true. It's true.
We'll see if anybody oversleeps tomorrow.
It's true.
I'm not going to now.
Don't miss the show. All right, well, some Democrats sticking by Congresswoman Ilhan Omar as she continues to make anti-Semitic comments.
I know her to be a fair-minded person.
Do you think she's taking responsibility? Republicans and the media have blown this up to be much more than it is.
Well, some of her biggest backers, 2020 Democratic presidential hopefuls. You see those folks on the left. We look at how they're, on the left, figuratively and metaphorically, they're handling the controversy. Coming up next.
And this gender reveal.
Taking responsibility. Islamophobia is also a huge problem. And I want to tell you that Ilhan Omar, Congresswoman, is under tremendous attack. Republicans and the media have blown this up to be much more than it is.
Well, some on the far left, as you can see, rallying to support Congresswoman Ilhan Omar following her anti-Semitic comments. In fact, some of her biggest backers, 2020 presidential hopefuls.
Here to break down how they handled the controversy, a senior writer for the Heritage Foundation and a fellow for the Independent Women's Forum, Kelsey Bolar. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning. It's great to be here.
So break down for viewers, how is it possible that we had reactions on the left saying this was literally being blown out of proportion when the comments were so offensive?
Well, that's a good question, and I think what's interesting is when it comes to the 2020 Democrats who are sitting senators, all of their responses and statements to these anti-Semitic comments were versions of the same thing, where basically they say we need to denounce and condemn anti-Semitism, but then they refuse to actually take the step and denounce the specific comments that Congresswoman Omar actually made. So it's like they're willing to talk the talk but not walk the walk.
Let's give an example. In fact, to your point, Kamala Harris, of course, Senator from California, part of her statement says, like some of my colleagues in the Congressional Black Caucus, I am concerned that the spotlight being put on Congressman Omar may put her at risk. We've heard this a lot, and she should not be getting death threats. So let's be very clear. There are members of Congress, Jewish, Muslim, all kinds of different faiths and backgrounds who get death threats. This is abysmal. It should not happen. But that doesn't excuse anti-Semitic comments, does it?
No, and absolutely no sitting member of Congress should face any sort of death threats. Let's be clear about that. But it is pretty incredible to see Senator Kamala Harris basically defend the person who made the anti-Semitic statements. You know, she's voicing more concern for her safety rather than the safety of the people, that the group, Jewish Americans, who the comments were actually directed to.
And Kelsey, we have two more comments we'd like you to hear and respond to. So we have Senator Bernie Sanders. He says, what I fear is going on in the House now is an effort to target Congresswoman Omar as a way of stifling that debate. That's wrong. And then we have Senator Elizabeth Warren, who said, in a democracy, we can and should have an open, respectful debate about the Middle East that focuses on policy. Threats of violence, like those made against Rep. Omar, are never acceptable. Now, is this simply shifting the focus away from her comments, obviously notwithstanding that we denounce threats of violence, and also, again, not with that same amount of reaction that those comments deserve?
Right. I think there's a lot of intellectual dishonesty in these two statements that you just mentioned, because Sanders is basically saying that Republicans are unwilling to engage in a debate over foreign policy when it comes to Israel, and that is far from the case. We've been doing that for decades. But instead, you know, what we need to be focusing on are these hateful remarks coming from a sitting member of Congress who needs to take responsibility for her actions and rhetoric.
Well, Kelsey Bollard, friend of the show, you recently got married, so your name changed from Harkness. We should remind our viewers that's why you have a new name.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Ed.
Lucky man.
All right, good luck.
Thank you.
Disgraced actor Jussie Smollett, meanwhile, now faces decades behind bars, accused in that hate crime hoax. David Webb has a reality check for the Empire star and says he's going to have to pay a big price. David Webb is next.
And who is Elizabeth Warren's dream running mate?
Pete?
Besides Pete, exactly. The 2020...
Cocaine that Border Patrol agents found hidden inside this truck door. An illegal immigrant trying to smuggle 55 pounds of the narcotic across Arizona's border. Reminder, an illegal immigrant, right there, drugs. The Mexican national was arrested and turned over to ICE. Next, $3.38 million. That's how much Royal Caribbean has to pay the family of a man who died of a heart attack aboard a cruise. A jury finding the company at least partly responsible after the ship's medical staff failed to properly address the victim's complaints. Royal Caribbean will now appeal that judgment. And finally, 15. That's how many years this Kansas couple has been eating at the same restaurant in the same booth for 6 days a week. Ron Watson, a Vietnam vet, says the routine started to spare his wife Diana from cooking after work. They like the place, Pete. They go there pretty much every day.
If you find the right spot, stick with it. Thanks, Ed. Appreciate it. All right, well, a grand jury in Chicago indicting actor Jussie Smollett on 16 felony counts of disorderly conduct, alleging he concocted a racist and homophobic attack against himself. But his lawyer says Smollett is a victim of a media gangbang.
What is happening here is, frankly, a media gangbang of this guy of unprecedented proportions. And that's the reason I got into this. I've never seen a media pendulum swing more quickly and more viciously and rob somebody of their presumption of innocence like this case. It's startling the way people assume that he's guilty.
Here to react, Fox News contributor and host of Reality Check with David Webb on Fox Nation. Don't miss it. David Webb, thanks for being here. So give us a reality check on this, David. Where are we?
Well, here's the first part, Pete. When you can't defend the perpetrator, what you do is you indict the system, and that's what his defense strategy is going to be. By the way, let me mention that we still don't know where the FBI is on processing the threatening letter that he sent with the powdery substance in it. Once they're finished, they'll make a decision on charging, but right now the charging authority seems to be Chicago. They didn't just indict him on the 16 counts, and I'm always careful of prosecutorial overkill when you overcharge. We saw that in Baltimore go badly after the Freddie Gray. But in this case, you've got someone who has defrauded the city, who has caused not irreparable, but immense harm to the community. And it's cost the city a lot of money. Not just the city, it's cost the taxpayers.
Yeah.
So Chicago's got a lot of egg on its face. And the one thing that Jussie Smollett's lawyers don't want to do is piss off the justice system in Chicago, because they're going to go even harder on him.
David, you mentioned egg on their face. Well, the media has a little bit, too. This is what they said about Smollett the day after he was charged. Listen.
This is a Jackie Robinson against homophobia in the black community, an icon, a beloved icon, and now you have the fall of an icon.
There is an atmosphere, as I said last week, and it remains true today, an atmosphere of menace and fear.
MAGA supporters have painted themselves as that. I mean, when you look at footage, when you hear things they say, this is the honest to goodness truth, and we have to be bold enough to call that out.
David, this is after the police charged him.
Yeah, and by the way, what an insult to Jackie Robinson. Let me tell you, I've read a lot about Jackie. Ed Henry wrote about him. He wouldn't do something like that. That wasn't the character of that man. So let's take that off the table. But it's not just the media, Pete. The media went crazy with this. Terrence Howard, his co-star, defended him. And on top of that, you have Kamala Harris and Cory Booker, two presidential candidates, who, along with a Republican co-sponsor, Tim Scott, had an anti-lynching bill in the Senate. And they, Kamala and Cory, used this to push it. So there was a political profit motive here to push this Jussie Smollett story, which from the very beginning, according to my sources, had so many holes in it that it looked like a hoax. We now know it is, and as alleged and as charged, it looks like he'll be convicted. So go back to what I said. Mark Garagos and all the other attorneys and all the teams and all of the crisis managers will try to turn this into indict the system, indict the police, indict the prosecutors. And Chicago, let me say something to you. You have been insulted. Tens of millions of Americans across America have been insulted because Jussie Smollett played on that specter of hate, of the MAGA hat being a symbol of hate. That's an indictment of tens of millions of Americans, and we shouldn't forget this.
Well said. A reality check. If you like David Webb, and I know you do, check it out on Fox Nation, Reality Check with David Webb. David, thanks for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Pete.
You got it. All right, well, the left never shies away from criticizing Vice President Mike Pence's Christian faith. But this time, the media turning on President Trump and the Bible, turning it into a joke. Why? We'll break down the back and forth coming up next. And did you know that our own Emily Campagno's family owns a wine vineyard in Oregon?
Who knew about this?
Call now or go to mypillow.com to order your My Pillow topper. Use the promo code to save 30%. When you do, Mike will give you 2 of his standard My Pillows absolutely free. That's right, 2 standard My Pillows free and 30% off your My Pillow topper today.
The most genetically unstable of any
personally
varietal.
guarantee it's going to change your bed into the most comfortable bed you'll ever own.
The exact same genetic clones of both. They taste radically different, the wines from both. So we also make a few different other varietals, white as well as
a working mom, I'm thankful my mom is able to help out.
It means
So I bought the all-new Jitterbug Flip from Great Call. It's so easy to use, and with a larger screen and bigger buttons,
and your
it's
father,
even easier to dial.
Was in the Navy.
There's also a 5-star button on the keypad.
Vineyard.
One touch and you'll be immediately connected to a highly trained agent who can confirm your location, assess the situation, and get you the help you need.
Service starts as low as $14.99 a month. Available at Best Buy or Rite Aid.
We've got a lot of awards for the taste. We have fire pits everywhere, a gorgeous view, super family friendly, dog friendly, as you can see.
Lets you see what you're doing. Pets have an internal span of hold the quick. So just Pedicure highlights the quicks, making it easier for you to safely cut your pet's nails. Plus, the nail coverage doubles as a magnifier to help you see close up.
The pedicure makes it a lot easier to cut accurately, so you don't cause any pain for your pet.
You love your pets, and they love you. Show them you care with Pedicure.
Super cool. And so, I mean, what does it take to win an award? I mean, your years you've cultivated the combination to get where you want to be.
Yeah,
here is a fun fact. Emily's family owns a wine vineyard in Oregon.
Who knew about this?
Ours
Muscle
are not,
cars,
and I think
Emily,
that's what is so valuable is the People's Choice Award, because we really wanted it to be a community place where people come, they have birthday parties, picnics, and so really, like I said, we're chemistry background, picnic friendly. We have trivia about helix, and this is kind of the science joke in that Pinot Noir is the most genetically unstable of any varietals. We had a vineyard in California, one in Oregon, the exact same genetic clones at the vineyard, actually, which is why we have radically different the wines from both. So we have, and we also make a few different other varietals, white as well.
I mean, everyone kind of wants to think they could own a winery or not, and you do.
It means, depending where you place the accent, it's fun to dig into risk, honestly, and it's also really amazing to see the whole process was, right? The agriculture aspect to the chemistry at the end.
John was in the Navy. He started this vineyard.
Got a couple inches of snow.
Yeah, he was a commander in the U.S. Navy, and so we have a commander's reserve bottled wine, which is really awesome.
This is looking at your temperatures
the winery
as you're
is
waking up
beautiful,
this
you guys.
morning.
I mean,
Warm
obviously I'm
across
biased,
parts
but
of the
we won the
south, and that is where we're
People's
going to have
Choice Award
another
4
threat
years
for
in a
some big
row.
severe weather
Got a
today.
lot of awards
To the
for the
north of
taste.
that
We had
is
fire
snow
pits
as well,
everywhere,
and
a
across
gorgeous view,
parts of
super
the far
family friendly,
northern
dog
plains. Take a
friendly,
look at
as
that
you can
snow.
see.
By the time
Up
you are done with this,
there.
parts of North Dakota in towards Minnesota, maybe 6 to 12 inches of snow. And it's the southern side of that beautiful area. Watching That part of the severe country weather. is Watch the spectacular. threat for tornadoes today. Not in the exact same spot where we had it last week. That will be tomorrow. It moves a little bit farther off towards east, but today is a bigger threat for tornadoes, and we could see a couple large ones. So because of what we saw last last week. Everybody certainly in that area.
Super cool. And so, I mean, what does it take to win an award? I mean, your years you've cultivated the combination to get where you want to be.
All right, turning now to your headlines. Disgraced pharmaceutical executive Martin Shirley maybe running his drug company from behind bars. Federal authorities now investigating claims that he's using a contraband cell phone to call the shots, even firing a chief executive, you guys, from behind bars, according to a Wall Street Journal report. The so-called Pharma Bro is serving a 7-year sentence for securities fraud.
Like what Lincoln looks nice when you're going to get married.
We have a pink tractor covered gender transition services in Iowa. Judges deciding reassignment surgeries are medically necessary and can't be denied. The bench finding that a 1995 policy denying Medicaid funding for such procedures discriminates against a protected class of people. Now, the liberal ACLU calls the ruling a, quote, landmark win. It's unclear if the state will appeal.
Got a couple inches of snow.
2020 presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren revealing her dream running mate.
We'll go to some weather here. This is looking at your temperatures as you're waking up this morning. Warm across parts of the south, and that is where we're going to have another threat for some big severe weather today. To the north of that is snow as well, and across parts of the far northern plains. Take a look at that snow. By the time we are done with this, parts of North Dakota in towards Minnesota, maybe 6 to 12 inches of snow. And it's the southern side of that.
The Democratic senator also revealing she wants to break up major tech companies, claiming Amazon, Google, and Facebook are monopolies.
We had it last week. That will be
A
tomorrow.
mom to be struggles to contain her disappointment when she finds out she's having another boy.
We could see a couple large ones. So because of what we saw last week, everybody certainly in that area be prepared for that. All right, guys, send it over to you.
All right, thanks, Rick.
Appreciate it.
All right, turning now to your headlines. Disgraced pharmaceutical executive Martin Shirley may be running his drug company from behind bars. Federal authorities now investigating claims that he's using a contraband cell phone to call the shots, even firing a chief executive, you guys, from behind bars, according to a Wall Street Journal report. The so-called Pharma Bro is serving a 7-year sentence for securities fraud.
You can't deny that.
I feel like they should never show him that. How does that make you feel? Medicaid must cover gender transition services in Iowa. Judges deciding reassignment surgeries are medically necessary and can't be denied. The bench finding that a 1995 policy denying Medicaid funding for such procedures discriminates against a protected class of people. Now, the liberal ACLU calls the ruling a, quote, landmark win.
He goes to a
it's
church,
unclear if the state will appeal.
Obviously using their faith
2020
to get through
presidential
this crisis,
candidate
some of other
Elizabeth
things,
Warren
people coming
revealing her
together.
dream
Perhaps somebody
running
asked him to
mate.
sign a Bible. All of a sudden, there were photos on social media. A big line of people held up their Bibles and said, Mr. President, would you sign my Bible?
How many people?
Yeah. Well, the media reacted this
it.
way,
Wasn't
predictably,
just
and unfortunately,
that they were big. It was that they
L.com
had
said
too much
Trump is
political
autographing Bibles now,
I
so
she had a lot of
that's a
confidence.
wrap on humanity.
You wrote a book in the
Right?
arena, right?
I did. Bill Frady, creator of
the
the Big
Democratic
Bang Theory,
senator
says
also
people don't
revealing she
understand
wants
the
to break
purpose
up
of
major
Trump
tech
signing
companies,
Bibles.
claiming
Many people
Amazon,
are
Google,
without
and
a way to
Facebook are
prepare
monopolies.
food after a
A
disaster. When
mom
Trump
to be
signs a Bible,
struggles to
it bursts
contain her
into
disappointment
flame,
when she
and
finds out
people
she's
can
having another
cook
boy.
over it. Matthew Dowd continues, I don't know who it is a worse commentary on. Trump actually signing Bibles in Alabama, or people asking him to sign a Bible. Lordy
A gender reveal
Moses.
party ending with
The
some
people
mixed
there
emotions in
actually
California.
wanted
Seeing
him
her
to do
husband
it.
jumping
So
for joy.
I know,
While she throws
I've been
her
out on the
confetti
road with
cannon to the
candidates where
ground.
they're
She
asked to
says
sign a
she's
dollar
happy to have
bill,
a
for
boy,
example.
but was hoping
And
to
there's
have
some
a nice,
controversy about
calm
whether
little
you're really
girl.
supposed to sign currency. If a
Those are your
citizen asks you
headlines.
and you're trying to be nice, what is the president going to do to these people who've just been through this horrific tragedy and lost family members? I'm not going to sign your Bible.
They should never show him that, though. I mean, how does that make you feel at that moment? And it is a reminder of what happened so many times in the past where you get that elitism coming out of the left where it's mocking people of faith. It's mocking these people who just lost 23 lives in their community and went through tornadoes, and it's just making a mockery out of the whole thing. Now, our friend Michelle Malkin, fact-checking, she says Truman signed note in an admirer's book of Psalms.
So what could possibly be controversial? Well, he goes to a church, people obviously using their faith to get through this crisis, among other things, people coming together. Perhaps somebody asked him to sign a Bible. All of a sudden, there were photos on social media, a big line of people held up their Bibles and said, Mr. President, would you sign my Bible?
Do you have a new life goal? Well, the media
my new
life goal is
this
President
way,
Trump signs a
predictably,
Bible that I own. L.com said that. I don't know. I'm just saying, what in the world is wrong with this? That's a wrap on humanity. Right? It's central to so many people's lives. You go through a Bang Theory, the president don't understand the purpose of Trump signing Bibles. It. Good for Many people are without a way to prepare food after a disaster. When Trump signs a Bible, it bursts into flame, and people can cook over it. Matthew Dowd continues, I don't know who it is a worse commentary on. Trump actually signing Bibles in Alabama,
releasing the transcript of DOJ official Bruce Orr's private testimony. We've been waiting for this. Guess what? There some juicy nuggets. Wanted him to do it. Tells us how it highlights. I've been out on the road with candidates where they're asked to sign a dollar bill, new connections, new ties between. And there's some controversy about whether you're really supposed to sign currency.
My favorite juicy nugget
where the unexpected awaits. A vacation that touches your soul, where unexpected moments become lifelong memories, bonding you to strangers, to friends, to the ocean. There are many vacations, but the best ones happen on an island called Paradise at a place called Atlantis.
Book your spring break or summer vacation by March 18th at 1-800-ATLANTIS or AtlantisBahamas.com.
Occasional bladder leakage.
I've had it. I've had it.
Had it with bladder leakage? Azo Bladder Control does what liners and pads can't. It supports bladder muscle strength to help reduce leakage.
Found myself in you. Know this love is true, and I'll never let you go. First
Elite Singles, the leading dating site for highly educated singles. Register today to love again at EliteSingles.com.
Flex Seal. Always have a can of Flex Seal in my house, always.
This stuff is awesome. Best stuff I ever got. I'm not sure what magic you guys do, but the stuff is incredibly durable.
Imagine everything you could do with the Flex Seal family of products.
Dry mouth? Choose Smart Mouth Dry Mouth. It's the only dry mouth rinse that also prevents bad breath for 24 hours. Great feel, no burning, no aftertaste, and paraben-free. At Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, or your favorite retailer.
We're Carvana, the company who invented car vending machines and buying a car 100% online. Now we've created a brand new way for you to sell your car, whether it's a few years old or dinosaur old.
Here is a fun fact. Emily's family owns a wine vineyard in Oregon.
Who knew about this? Muscle cars, Emily, and now vineyards as well. It's not something you get into willy-nilly. How'd your family get involved?
No, right. So my dad, he was a physician, and so really it came from that kind of chemistry background. You can see that our emblem is a double helix, and this is kind of the science joke in that Pinot Noir is the most genetically unstable of any varietal. So we had a vineyard in California, one in Oregon, the exact same genetic clones of both, but they taste radically different. The wines from both. So we have, but we also make a few different other varietals, white as well as you
And the name has significance.
Ardiri, yes, it's a Sicilian word. It means, depending where you place the accent, to take a risk or being consumed by fire, which is what the endeavor was, right?
Oh, very cool. And your father, John, was in the Navy. He started this vineyard, you know. Pretty cool.
Yeah, he was a commander in the U.S. Navy, and so we have a commander's reserve bottle of wine, which is really awesome. And the winery is beautiful, you guys. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but we won the People's Choice Award 4 years in a row. We've got a lot of awards for the taste. We have fire pits everywhere, a gorgeous view, super family-friendly, dog-friendly, as you can see. My dog up there.
I was just looking where it is on a map, because I'm map and geography interested. So just west of Portland, I mean, it's such a beautiful area. That part of the country is spectacular.
It is really
Why have you not invited us yet?
Yeah.
There's only so much inventory, Pete. But all of you guys are welcome. Really, we would love to have you guys. We love visitors.
Super cool. And so, I mean, what does it take to win an award? I mean, your years you've cultivated this the combination to get where you want to be.
Yeah, and you know, I think oftentimes when you hear of awards, they're kind of pay-to-play situations. Ours are not. And I think for us, what was so valuable is the People's Choice Award, because we really wanted it to be a community place where people come, they have birthday parties, picnics, right? Like I said, we're dog-friendly, we're picnic-friendly. We have trivia nights, movie nights.
Ardiri.com.
Yes.
Cool.
And if you're like me, you just want a good label. Like, what label looks nice when you're going to get one?
Yeah.
And
we have a
nice.
pink tractor at the vineyard, actually, which is why we have a pink tractor rosé.
Beautiful.
And, yeah, marketing stuff.
This is super cool. I mean, everyone kind of wants to think they could own a winery or not, and you do.
I do. It's fun to dig in the dirt, honestly, and it's also really amazing to see the whole process from the agriculture aspect to the chemistry at the end. And I'm biased as well, but really it's delicious.
All right, did you know that Portland got a couple inches of snow right now? Also, winter's still happening.
I did not know that.
Parts of Oregon.
Take it away.
So yeah, we'll go to some weather here. This is look at your temperatures as you're waking up this morning. Warm across parts of the south, and that is where we're going to have another threat for some big severe weather today. To the north of that is snow as well, in across parts of the far northern plains. Take a look at that snow. By the time we are done with this, parts of North Dakota in towards Minnesota, maybe 6 to 12 inches of snow. And it's the southern side of that we're watching severe weather. Watch the threat for tornadoes today. Not in the exact same spot where we had it last week. That will be tomorrow. It moves a little bit farther off towards east, but today is a bigger threat for tornadoes, and we could see a couple large ones. So because of what we saw last week, everybody certainly in that area, be prepared for that. All right, guys, send it over to you.
All right, thanks, Rick.
Appreciate it.
All right, turning now to your headlines. Disgraced pharmaceutical executive Martin Shkreli may be running his drug company from behind bars. Federal authorities now investigating claims that he's using a contraband cell phone to call the shots, even firing a chief executive, you guys, from behind bars, according to a Wall Street Journal report. The so-called Pharma Bro is serving a 7-year sentence for securities fraud.
He's been shut down now.
Iowa's highest court rules Medicaid must cover gender transition services in Iowa. Judges deciding reassignment surgeries are medically necessary and can't be denied. The bench finding that a 1995 policy denying Medicaid funding for such procedures discriminates against a protected class of people. Now, the liberal ACLU calls the ruling a, quote, landmark win. It's unclear if the state will appeal. 2020 presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren revealing her dream running mate.
Is it Pete?
I don't think so.
On the trust, and he didn't care how many people were going to be mad about it. It wasn't just that they were big, it was that they had too much political power.
I think you and she have a lot of common. I'm hearing.
You wrote a book in the arena, right?
I did.
All right, the Democratic senator also revealing she wants to break up major tech companies, claiming Amazon, Google, and Facebook are monopolies. A mom-to-be struggles to contain her disappointment when she finds out she's having another boy.
3, 2, 1!
She's having none of it.
Every time. The gender reveal party ending with some mixed emotions in California. Poor thing, her husband jumping for joy while she throws her confetti cannon to the ground. She says she is happy to have a boy, but was hoping to have a nice, calm little girl. Those are your headlines.
Oh, that is so true.
That is something else.
I love authentic.
I love this. I know, totally.
And she'll love that boy, but like you can't deny that.
I feel like they should never show him that, though. I mean, how would that make you feel if that moment your mom was
I'd be like,
oh,
gotcha, Mom. I'm here.
Well, you want to talk about Trump derangement syndrome? We've got a whole new level of it. So the president does something nice yesterday, right? He goes to Alabama. He's sort of comforter-in-chief. I covered Barack Obama. He did that. George W. Bush. Yep. We had 23 people killed by these horrific tornadoes. So what could possibly be controversial? Well, he goes to a church, people obviously using their faith to get through this crisis, among other things, people coming together. Perhaps somebody asked him to sign a Bible. All of a sudden, there were photos on social media. A big line of people held up their Bibles and said, Mr. President, would you sign my Bible?
Yeah. Well, the media reacted this way, predictably, Ed, unfortunately. Elle.com said, Trump is autographing Bibles now, so that's a wrap on humanity, right? Bill Prady, creator of The Big Bang Theory, says people don't understand the purpose of Trump signing Bibles. Many people are without a way to prepare food after a disaster. When Trump signs a Bible, it bursts into flame, and people can cook over it. Matthew Dowd continues, I don't know who it is a worse commentary on, Trump actually signing Bibles in Alabama or people asking him to sign a Bible. Lordy Moses.
The people there actually wanted him to do it. So I know, I've been out on the road with candidates where they're asked to sign a dollar bill, for example. And there's some controversy about whether you're really supposed to sign currency. If a citizen asks you and you're trying to be nice, what is the president going to do to these people who have just been through this horrific tragedy and lost family members? I'm not going to sign your Bible?
And I think that, unfortunately, it's so telling, and it is a reminder of what happened so many times in the past where you get that elitism coming out out of the left where it's mocking people of faith. It's mocking these people who just lost 23 lives in their community and went through tornadoes, and it's just making a mockery out of the whole thing. Now, our friend Michelle Malkin, fact-checking, she says Truman signed note in an admirer's book of Psalms, autographs of Clinton's, Gore, Carter's, Mondale, and Bible of collector Stephen Koshel.
Oh, so they all signed. Democrats signed, too.
Exactly. And heads exploding over Trump signing Bibles for Alabama tornado survivors.
Yeah, send us your comments, friends@foxnews.com. Like me, do you have a new life goal? My new life goal is President Trump signs a Bible that I own. I'm going to work on that. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, what in the world is wrong with this? Right. Faith is so important. It's central to so many people's lives. You go through a tragedy. The President of the United States is there. He signs it. Good for you.
It's also personal. Exactly. Faith is personal, and so how you choose to honor it or deal with it should be your decision, and certainly those on the left shouldn't be decrying how others view their Bibles when it relates to the President of the United States.
Amen.
Yeah. Amen. Right. Well done, Ed.
House Republicans releasing the transcript of DOJ official Bruce Orr's private testimony. We've been waiting for this. Guess what? It has some juicy nuggets, and Tom Fitton tells us how it highlights his ties to the author of the anti-Trump dossier. New connections, new ties between Orr and Christopher Steele. That's coming up.
My favorite juicy nugget, a chicken nugget. And a group of eco-activists now say they won't have kids because they're scared to bring them into the world.
Oh, boy.
They're serious about this. Women pledging not to have kids. Rachel Campos-Debbie never gave such a pledge. She's a mom of 8. She tells us why having a baby is the ultimate sign of optimism.
Cocaine that Border Patrol agents found hidden inside this truck door. An illegal immigrant trying to smuggle 55 pounds of the narcotic across Arizona's border. Reminder, an illegal immigrant, right there, drugs. The Mexican national was arrested and turned over to ICE. Next, $3.38 million. That's how much Royal Caribbean has to pay the family of a man who died of a heart attack aboard a cruise. A jury finding the company at least partly responsible after the ship's medical staff failed to properly address the victim's complaints. Royal Caribbean will now appeal that judgment. And finally, 15. That's how many years this Kansas couple has been eating at the same